Questions Peggy wanted answered about Nellie, and she said what was her relationship with her in-laws. And anytime we visited down there, Nellie was very friendly and close with Bill's sisters. He was the oldest, and then the girls were next to him, and his brother was a number of years younger. Bill and his brother were never close, but the sisters were close to Nellie, and she sewed with them, and they exchanged recipes and cooked together and did the family things that people do. And they always seemingly got along very well. And Bill's mother and father were very pleased with Nellie and really did think a lot of her, I'm sure. And her relationship with her children, she worked with them like when Marion was little. Marion was up on the counter of the cabinets, and they would do dishes together. And here's Marion, about 3 years old, putting all the dishes in the right place, and putting them away and helping and doing all that kind of thing. So Nellie, being a kindergarten and a first grade teacher, she was good with little children. And sometimes well, maybe not only me, some of our family kind of thought when Corky came along, she kind of favored him because he was a boy. But that's sort of a tendency in my mother's family too. My mother always sort of waited on the boys. And we did too. We girls all did. We waited on the boys. We paid special attention to boys, but that's old country thinking, So, but I don't know that she really was, what was the relationship with her own sisters and brothers? Nellie worked a lot with Charlie. She took him, I remember, when she was teaching, she went on a vacation to Winnipeg and took him. He was, maybe 8, 10 or something like that. She would take him along. And she got along well with all of them, and I think I was as close to her as any of them, being the one closer to her. And while we were children and little, we were dressed alike. Our dresses would be about the same, but I would have 3 ruffles and she'd have 2, and that sort of thing, went on. My mother sewed for us.
Did you look alike?
I don't know that we did, but I do have some pictures when she and I were very small children. She was little, of course. She was petite and little. And she always had that little kind of a wandering eye that would go off in the wrong direction. And that is sort of a family trait. I think that's one of the things that Nellie and my Aunt Annabelle discovered in Marion when she was a baby and little. They got her to the doctor when she was about 3 years old and put glasses on her right away. And she has the same family stigmatism that we do. So
is that why Nellie had glasses too?
Nellie wore glasses. I had never worn glasses till I was 7. And when we went to Glasgow to live, my Aunt Annabelle was very conscious of eye problems. And she took me to what they call the Glasgow Infirmary. And I remember going there, a big line of chairs, people sitting, mothers with babies on their lap, and all kinds of matted eyes and sore eyes and all of that sort of thing. And that's where I got my first glasses. And evidently That was either a city eye infirmary or I don't know who paid for it, but we got the glasses. It was like city owned. And that's the first, and I wore glasses from then on, always. But my Aunt Annabelle was the one, my mother wasn't really noticing those things. But as I said, Alfred and I attended Nellie and Bill's wedding, and we were together. We took vacations together and things like that. And other than that, she became ill, and Bill took her on a trip to Minnesota Lakes, thinking maybe that would be what, and that was just about the beginning of her sickness. And I believe they were married about 14 years. No special events except the birthdays and the trip to Jamestown. They'd come, bring the family, like they would come for birthdays or for the fair. She would come and spend the whole week. Bill would bring her and leave her, and then, but Nellie never really drove a car. She could drive, but by the time her children were little, she had no need to be driving, and she never had a car to drive. She didn't get into that driving bit that I did. And why did she choose to be a teacher? I don't know. Only that was, she chose that as her profession while she was in high school. And she liked teaching. She taught in, first she taught in Woodworth, North Dakota, which was a country school out in the country. And Woodworth was a great hunting farmland. Lots of huge wheat fields, and the farmhouses were far apart. And she lived in a home where some of the children would walk to school, or they would take them to school at that school. Then she went to another school, and it was south of Jamestown, either close to Combe or Ypsilanti or down that way. But in that school there were 2 rooms and 2 school teachers, and they were to live in the school building and had like an apartment. And part of their duties was to keep the furnace running all night and all day, you know, in the winter time. And that got rather difficult. Get better. It was less taxing, and I think they were a little bit afraid of living there, just the 2 of them, when everybody in the countryside knew they were there.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays you would never think of doing anything like that.
So this is when she was, what, in her 20s?
Yes, yes. Well, then she went from that school to Wishick, and she had her own room, because Wishick was a town school. Well, became like a small city. I don't know the population of Wishick, but we have been back there a few years back to see the building, and we visited, Jessie and Bud and Helen and I went back one of the years that Helen and I were back there. And we went to lunch, and we went to the hardware and what they used to do there, and they were interested. And we saw the house that Bill and Nellie built, and it's still there and in good repair, and just about a block from the school. So that was interesting. Now, do you want to shut her off a little bit?
Sure.
I'd get down to the end of where she went to school. Social things, I don't know that they really had much, only that they went to church on Sunday, and that was about the extent of their.
Did Bill mind Nellie working, or did she work at all with the kids? Or?
She never worked after she was married. No, she always was a housewife from then on.
Okay.
Before Marion was born.
It's a major job.
She never worked after that.
Okay.
I was the one that ventured out. And my aunts rigged up a little office light in the attic, and he did his drawings and made plans for building homes. And he and Uncle Charlie and a man by the name of Bandine were in partnership, and they built houses in the summertime. But Uncle Joe was the architect, and he drew the plans in the wintertime. But Uncle Joe was a very good skater. He skated a lot in
Ice skate?
Winnipeg, yeah, in the wintertime. Of course, you know, they only have about 3 months summer.
Right.
Get a lot of practice.
Yeah.
You get into the winter sports.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember my aunts telling when he would go skating in Fraserburgh, which was a short-term thing, he was embarrassed to go because people would stand up watching him skate, you know, because
He's good.
in Fraserburgh you don't skate much.
Doesn't get cold enough.
Yeah, it's so cold you don't swim much either. In that cold country. But those people are used to the cold. Well, I will get on with my tonic here. I think this is kind of good.
It's very different taste. I mean, it's something. At first, I wasn't sure, and the more I drank
All right, we're on again.
She said, did she have any special dreams? that she ever talked about. We were going to begin up at the top. What special talents or hobbies did Nellie have? Not any that I knew of, except that she did hand sewing and sewed for her children and learned to be a good cook and was a good housewife and a good mother. And teaching was really her. It was not only her talents and her hobby, but her profession. And what was she like? What made her happy, laugh, sad, mad? How did she relate with other people? I can't really give you special answers on that either, because I don't recall that any thinking. We all got along well together, you know, as brothers and sisters and so on. We're excited and happy about the home and coming home for special holidays and things like that. And I do know she was very friendly with Bud's oldest sister, Ella. I'm sure it was Ella.
No, it was.
Well, Ella was the one she was friendly with anyway. And Ella and Augie lived in Wishick.
Different Bud, sorry, yes.
Oh, a different part of the family.
My dad's Bud.
Oh, different family, yeah.
That's right, that makes sense. Good.
Anyway, she and Ella compared notes and recipes and patterns and, you know, like sisters would. So she and Ella were very friendly. And other than that, I don't know of her having really any special friends too much. She had lots of friends and persons' names I don't. What special person influenced her life? I don't know any more than my mother probably. And what did she like to do or dislike? Well, she liked to do what had to be done. That was about it. And I don't know who her closest siblings were. She was always very motherly and friendly with Charlie, because Charlie was younger, and I know one year she went to Winnipeg on a vacation, and during summer vacation, and took Charlie with her. And we have pictures of them up with my uncle and aunts when they would go picnicking and things like that, cooking outside and making tea with a tea kettle on a open fire, you know, that sort of thing.
Was that
And
camping?
in Winnipeg, they went camping. I don't know if they camped out overnight or they just went camping for the day and cooked their meals, but they did go out quite a bit. And any favorite things, and that I don't know. Why did she leave home at such an early age? Well, you leave home as soon as you're able to go out and get a job.
How old was she?
What else do you do? She wasn't that old. She finished high school and was home summers. She taught, you know, and then was home in the summertime again. And then she'd be gone for the 9 months of school. Then she'd come home, or else she was back into going to school. And everybody in those days left home as soon as they were able to earn their own way. That was just par for the course. And when and where did she meet? Oh, this was me, that she said. Why did I leave home at an early age? I did the same thing. I went out to get a job. And I met Alfred at the state hospital. He came back from World War I in February, and the next fall he got work at the hospital, and I had been working there for maybe 8 or 10 months before that. And I met him at the dances there. We had dances every week, which was a big deal. And when and were married, and any family there. We were married in Jamestown, and we had another couple that were friends of ours, and we were married in the parsonage, and the other couples stood up with us. And we went to Valley City on our honeymoon, 39 miles by train. All that distance.
Was it
And
what was there that you went to honeymoon?
Well, it was just a place to go for the weekend.
Different
Nice
place.
hotel.
Yeah, it was some place to go. And it was winter, and we were married the 29th of January, and of course it was cold, and we didn't have a car or anything, so and I don't believe there were buses. You went by train anywhere you went. And to go to Minneapolis would have been farther and more expensive, so that was why. When was Jane born? She was born in September. And when and why did she go to live with Grandma? Well, she was 18 months old when I got work at the state hospital again. I went back to work, and she went to live with my father and mother, and we went down
And how
every
far
night.
away?
They were about 1.5 miles from the hospital. And we went down there by car every night. When the weather was bad and a lot of snow, we would walk. But we went every night. And Alfred always had her on Sundays because he had Sunday off, and I had her on my weekday off, which was, they changed. For a while we had only one day, and then for a while we had two. So we had her twice a week, and we were always down there every night.
Was that kind of hard? I mean, for you? Because I mean, going back to work and
Yes.
because
To-
I
it
don't want
was
to leave
it
John
was
and-
very hard to begin with to leave her at 18 months, and they told me it would be better for me and better for her if I didn't see her for 2 or 3 days.
the people
And
at the state
that
hospital or your
just nearly
parents. Or?
killed me. Well,
told
both
you
my
that?
parents and friends of mine at the hospital. Friends of mine, you know, just thought that would be an easier way for both of us, and I don't really know that it was, you know, that I have my doubts about. But, you know,
That's what you had
she
to do.
was acquainted with Jesse, and of course she knew my parents and all the rest of them, but she was real close to Jesse, and Jesse was 6 years old, so she had somebody that she could lean to, and she and Jesse were all through their lives very close, very close. Tell about George. What was he like? Well, George was definitely a he-man, and he played tennis. He played with a tennis group from the YMCA, and they were really pretty good at playing tennis, that group, and played all through high school and after they were older. And he went hunting with, Alfred took him with him when George was out of school and old enough to be going. Alfred taught him to hunt and took him with him, and they did all that sort of thing. And then he bought himself a real nice little car, and it was a sports car, a bright, like pea green with red wire wheels. Oh, that was really the car. And he used to let me drive that car a lot. And it was a sports car with a top that came down, you know, a convertible top, leather top, and side curtains, and that was really a sportsy car. He was a butcher before the war. He was working in Dad's butcher shop when he went away with them, and he was stationed for a while in Wyoming, out of Cheyenne. I've forgotten the name of the camp that was there. And then they were all sent to Fort Lewis, Washington. And part of their time, Charlie and George were both stationed at Fort Lewis. But Charlie was in the Medic Corps, and George was in the infantry. And Charlie was in the medics all the time he was in the service. And then they broke up that group and spread them out. And Betty Savage's husband, my husband's niece, who lives over here at Cupertino, her husband was with that group, and he was sent to the Air Corps. And George stayed with the, what did they call the big weapon group, tanks and
Cavalry?
It's
Artillery?
something like that.
Heavy artillery.
Yeah, the artillery. Yeah, that was, he was in that group and was sent to out in the Pacific. And he was in a tank in the Pacific during the mop-up. When he was killed, the tank was blown up. But he was the staff sergeant with that group. Well, from the time he left Jamestown and went out with them. And Dad got a call in the night late one day, and the U.S. government was trying to get a decision made about where George's body would be brought for burial. His wife had given up, did not want to be responsible, so she refused to be the next of kin. And my father took over the responsibility, and I remember them telling Jesse and Bud, he just sat up practically all one night wondering what would be the best place. He had a choice, either Hawaii or a home burial or a national cemetery. And Dad thought, well, he was older, and Mary and Ann were in Minneapolis, and he thought if he were buried in Fort Snelling, somebody would be close, you know. So that's why he decided. And the body was taken to Fort Snelling.
Now, where's that?
And out of Minneapolis.
Okay, so that's in Minnesota.
It's in Minnesota. And Mary and Ann and my dad were all there at the funeral. Mary's husband and Ann's husband. I don't know that any of their children were there. But his wife and his children were not there, although they had notified them. But she didn't come, and she didn't bring the children. But since the children have grown up, they have wanted to know where their father was and about, and have written to me and to the rest of the family and found out. And now I hear regularly from the oldest daughter, who lives in Maple Plains, Minnesota.
Were they? Or, I mean, that just seems odd.
No, the
for
wife
your
just
wife just didn't
kind
know.
of chose to be separated when he was away, and of course she is not living now. So, and I told some about where his family was. One of the sons, the youngest son, is a beekeeper, and the last I know, he was out of Minneapolis, Chautauqua, something like that. Anyway, there's part of out of Minneapolis where he has bees, and the oldest boy was in the Green Berets until he retired. He was a permanent Army person, and was in. He did a lot of working as an instructor, and they rappelled from high buildings and out of airplanes and all that sort of thing. So I think I've told about practically all the sisters. She says, tell about the sisters, and Helen, Ann, I believe, did I tell about Ann's family in Minneapolis? I don't think I went through Ann's family. Helen, I told you about her. Helen, and of course.
She's the one in LA.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
and Jesse was in Jamestown and passed away in Jamestown. And she was alone when she was the only one in Jamestown when my mother passed away. But she was married in Minneapolis after having finished nurses training and worked in a hospital in Minneapolis. And she married Marv Larson, who was out of the Navy and had been out on sea duty for, in a couple of torpedoed ships, and has quite a history while he was in active duty. But his duty aboard ship was to sew and repair all the flags. And he worked a sewing machine, and that was what he did. It kept him busy all the time. All the signal flags, and
Oh,
all
yeah.
the flags, you know, there's a lot to do. And Marv tells lots of stories about the Navy. And they, about a year ago, they had a big reunion. About 3 buddies that were on the same ship came to Anoka and spent time together. And Anne has a big write-up about that reunion. But Anne and Marv had 5 boys. And Anne nursed in between times with every one of her children. She went back to work and all those years worked for the state hospital at Anoka and was the surgical nurse. And
there are a lot of medical people. In
yes,
the family.
and she had the same person babysit all 5 of her boys. But with Mike, she thought she wasn't going to go back to work. Mike was the 3rd boy, and so she was home longer with Mike. And when they took Mike to the babysitter, he was not happy. He didn't want to be there. And so Marvin kept him, and he would take him on the tractor and do the furrows. And when he got sleepy, he'd just lay him down the end of the furrow and let him sleep and come back and check him and back and forth. So Mike didn't really go to the babysitter, but the other, John and Ben, all went with the babysitter. And now they're all grown up and married, and they all live in and around Anoka. They're close around. And Marv and Ann have bought a piece of an acreage. I've forgotten how much land, but each one of those boys got a piece of land, enough to build a house or start out or do something. They've done very well with their family. And Marv was one of the
Excuse us. Oh, yeah.
well-known dairy farmers in Minnesota. He has sold cattle, cows, and stock, you know, breeding stock. Sent it to Sweden and foreign countries, and had people come over. He had a very good record and a lovely farm, but he's feeling real sad now because he sold the farm, and the man that bought the farm has cut it up, and it's all into acreage, and they're building out that way now, so his farms are kind of cut up. Yeah. She said, did your parents write much to their parents after they moved to Scotland or from Scotland? Yes, my mother wrote her sisters, of course, regularly, and to Dad's sisters. But Dad did not write letters that much. He wasn't that much of a writer. What were the happy family celebrations? Well, generally it was weddings and birthdays, that sort of a thing, Christmas and Easter.
Did they celebrate like when Nellie graduated? And
Yes,
things like that? Special occasions?
yeah. It would be a special dinner and a special something. Usually it was a dinner, you know, something at home. We didn't have barbecues and that sort of thing. Picnics were the only outside thing. But one thing my mother always did, and your mother remembers, fair time in the summertime, they always took a picnic on the 4th of July to the fair. And my mother made chicken salad that everybody just thought that was out of this world. And they'd spend the whole day down there. And at that time, the butcher shop was busy grinding up hamburger. Oh, they'd kill a bull and grind the whole thing for hamburger.
Oh my God.
Hamburger, just lots of it. And during the times that meat was cheap, you know, 25 cents a pound for hamburger. But that was a big thing. Everybody went to the fair. And the carnival, of course, was on in the evenings, and everybody would go to carnival for the evenings. And that was a big thing. But that's the kind of celebrations we had. Did the Frasers have much contact with the Hoffs? Well, when my parents would go down to visit Nellie and Bill, they would visit with the Hoff people. I remember being invited down to the Hoff home, and they had a big basement, beautifully all painted white and whitewashed, and the cement floor scrubbed till you couldn't believe it. And they did their summer cooking and sort of lived in the cool basement, you know. And they did a lot of canning and a big garden and that sort of thing. But of course, Bill's dad was always in the hardware store. He was working in the hardware all the time. And when and why did you move to California? Well, I believe I did cover that, but we came after the war was over in '45. We came out here because Jane was already in California, and we were here 6 months, and she had met her husband, got married, and moved to Massachusetts. And we said, we're not going to move again.
And what brought Jane out here?
She came out here because Helen was out here. You know, yeah. And Helen came out because her husband came out to his uncle and aunt. And then his parents came to Los Angeles. It was a big moving time. The war did that to most people.
Yeah, yeah.
What did I like best about Scotland? Well, I don't know. One thing I know, I wouldn't want to go there to live. It's too cold. And
So you went to North Dakota.
and well, North Dakota is even warmer because North Dakota is a dry cold, and Scotland is damp and cold. And
I was gonna say, and then you moved to San Francisco, isn't it always cold
yeah,
here?
yeah. But there's
It's nicer than
nothing.
Scotland.
I like to vacation in Scotland, and I like to visit, but their habits and their traditions and so forth, I wouldn't care about being in it all the time. So, you know, you just learn. The best about North Dakota and the least, well, North Dakota is a good state. It has the best education program, and they tell us even now that the children from North Dakota are, well, are some of the best for their age, the best educated. And, you know, we have a lot of good people that came from North Dakota, like Louis L'Amour. He was, Louis L'Amour's sister, the youngest sister, was in my grade, and I believe she must have been sick with rheumatic fever because that was the first year I was going to school in North Dakota, and we used to go 2 or 3 people from the class over to visit her. Their home was very close to the school, and we would visit her, and she passed away, and it's one of the Methodist church, and the casket was in the church, and the teacher gave each one of us a pansy to put on the casket, and we walked up and laid. Remember if it was open or not. I can't remember seeing the body, but
A classmate, that'd be.
Louis L'Amour's father was a veterinary, and he took care of all the cattle and hogs and sheep and what, rode all over the country with a horse and buggy. I remember him, Dr. Lamore. And of course there's Peggy Lee and how many.
Wow.
Jesse nursed Peggy Lee's father when he was on his deathbed. She was his personal nurse. And oh, there's lots of good things about North Dakota. It's a wonderful place to go to and to drive through. Lots of land and space and pretty skies and thunderstorms and all of that. My favorite place to live is right here in Palo Alto. I have never lived. Denver we liked very much, but all around Palo Alto has better climate, and I have gotten used to the traffic, and you get used to more people, and all my friends are here, and I choose not to have to leave, I hope. So anyway, that, what kind of relationship? Oh, Nellie and I always got along well. And because we were both married, yeah, fairly young and so forth, and our children were all about the same, you know. Of course, Jane is about 5 years older than Marion, I think, about that. So that's down to the end of the page.
Okay, well, I think there's a couple more. The next
You got a little more? I didn't intend to be telling all about Louis Lamar. But you know, during my lifetime I kept thinking, I ought to write to him and tell him that I knew his sister, because not very many people are living.
Yeah.
That
Sure.
And then he up and died on me. But he does have an older sister who was a very educated person, and she did a lot of writing. And when my husband was in the World War I, the National Guard that they went away with, Parker Lamore was one of the other people that were a brother of Louis Lamore's, his youngest brother, was in the same company. So, you know, North Dakota
Small.
people are side by side. Now, I don't know what else she has attached to this.
I think those are just some date things.
Yeah, I
that
think
we'll
so.
This
And
is just,
I got the little part that was on the top.
this is kind of a personal question. You can choose to answer it or not.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, you just had one baby. Did you
Yeah.
want more, or did you stop with Jane on purpose? Or?
No, we really didn't want more children. And I sometimes, well, the time we had been married 3 years or so, we began to realize my husband wasn't as well as he might have been. And I think I had enough children. I helped to
So you
take
had to
care
bring
of
them.
many younger ones that they didn't fascinate me like they do other people. And I was working and helping to make the living.
That makes sense.
Yeah. As I look back at it, we didn't think about it that much, you know, in those days. But that's the way it was. And I don't mind answering those questions.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's about it.
We've covered lots. Anything
Thank you so much.
anything you want
I
to say?
can't think of anything else. I will probably think of lots of things when this is all over. Why didn't I do this or do that? But I think I've covered practically all my parents' family and both my grandparents. I was fortunate enough to have known my mother's mother and my father's father, to know them well. The rest of the family never knew them.
Right.
And we lived for many years in North Dakota with no relatives and no close friends until my mother's sister and Uncle Jimmy came. When Auntie Bella and Uncle Jimmy came then. But we had no Scottish friends. There weren't any Scottish people in Jamestown.
And you're all Norwegian and German
Yes,
probably.
yes. One lady, a Mrs. Milks, was working at the state hospital who had come from Scotland. But I was never a close friend of hers. She was a number of years older than I was.
We'll send this off to Peggy, and I'm sure she'll come up with
Yeah.
another 12 pages of
I
questions.
hope it suits you, Peggy.
Yeah, really.
We've had a lot of fun doing
This
it.
has been wonderful. Oh, just so fun. Yay.
You may have noticed an abrupt change there. Technical difficulties. But we're back. Notice he's changed. He's ready to go.
Ready to go to bed. Say good night, Aunt Peggy.
Same
Good night,
night.
Uncle Mark. Good night, Cousin Adam.
So, where were we?
We aren't as eloquent as Aunt Isobel, I'm afraid.
She's,
She's wonderful.
that's where Mom gets her skills, we've decided. Anyway, pictures. We'll send those along. And
Look at the camera.
we'll also, if yours turned out any better, mine
The light meter isn't working on our camera, so
gives us problems. And the other thing we'll do is we'll tack on the extra time after this. We'll just record the most recent Jonathan stuff. He was smiling just a little bit ago.
you bet. See yourself? It's
And-
you and Peggy.
So we're obviously talkative and doing all sorts of fun things, but this is us in Stanford. And we're having a good time, relaxing. He's growing, eating a lot. Hey, turn your back to him. And Uncle Mark. So,
You really can't wait to play with him. Really. If you can tell.
we'll tack on some more fun scenes from him at more pleasant times after this. Okay? Anything else?
There are other things that I don't remember what the others are.
For some reason, with a squirming baby, it's a little hard to say goodbye.
Bye. Love you. Oh, that was great.
You can see a little light there.
Ooh. That must be how they do the fingers in
Oh, it's
Star
just,
Trek.
you can't see it here.
Ooh. It's because there's no remote, there's no signal. That's why. When you point it to your face, so what has it got to do? Nothing.